All right, and this is part 2 for this week's lecture series for our 3 cardinal rules. And this cardinal rule has to do with what's called depth of field, which we in the photography area do shorten down to DOF. So if you are not familiar with depth of field is an issue that happens with focus range. And it comes into play when you start playing with camera settings and the fact that the camera in certain settings can have a very long focal length where it can focus in on multiple objects at the same time, but at a different setting it can only focus in on a smaller chunk of the space. So what we end up with as a situation is, depending on your depth of field and depending on your focal length, you end up with a situation like we see in this little image where we have all these Lego guys lined up, and the one guy in the middle is crisp and clear and you can see him perfectly, but all the folks moving away from him in each direction are very difficult to see. So that is a great example of depth of field. Now, just so we are aware, so you understand how this works, depth of field is predominantly controlled by your aperture, aka the f-stop. So when you think about how a camera lens operates or how a camera works, you have the lens, which allows light in. And remember, at the beginning of the semester we said that photography is writing with light. So the lens lets light into the camera, and so the lens is essentially like your eyeball. And your eyeball has that black area called the pupil. And so when you're out and about on a sunny day, your pupils become little pinpoints so that less light gets in. And when you're in a dark room, your pupil grows, gets all big so that more light can get in. That's why, like, when you walk into a dark room and you're coming out of a light area, you can't see anything. And then, once your eyes get adjusted to the light, you can see everything. I always kind of laugh, where, I go and tuck my son in for bed and I can barely see where I'm going in his room. And if he gets up in the middle of the night and is fussing, I can go into my son's room and I see everything. I can see what's laying there on the floor as it relates to toys. I don't kick anything. And the lighting conditions haven't changed in any way, shape, or form in his room. All that's changed is the fact that when I went and put him to bed, when I turned off his light, my eyes were accustomed to the light in the room, and it takes a while for that pupil to dilate, to open up. Versus in the middle of the night, I've been sleeping, I got my eyes closed, and so, my pupil is already dilated, and when I go into his room at that point, I've already adjusted to the darkness. Conversely, in the morning, when you get up and you walk around your room, you can see everything, you turn on the light, and it's like, whoa, you gotta shade your eyes, and your eyes actually hurt because it takes time for that pupil to constrict. Or you go from inside your house to outside, and if you're not wearing sunglasses, it's cause you to wince. So think of the aperture of your camera like the pupil of your eye. So here's what the apertures actually look like inside of a camera. That's a little disc, and it just kind of shuts in over itself. And so you can have the f2, the aperture is wide open, allowing all kinds of light in. And you can go down, to like f22. There's, different settings, different cameras have the different abilities, but 2 to 22 is kind of the most common, where it's getting down to just a little pinprick. So here we can see a guy with his pupil, eyes open, and the pupil constricting down. Same guy. All right, so looking at this, what we end up with is when you have a small f-stop, you have a small depth of field. So our aperture here is big, wide open, f2. We can see the monkey, and the fence pickets vanish pretty quick. Versus when we have f22, we have the less light coming in. We can see all the fence pickets and the monkey. Now, because photography is writing with light, it becomes a balancing act, because your camera also has what's called the shutter speed. And the shutter speed is kind of like your eyelids, where the shutter opens and closes to allow light in. Now, cameras, when you have light coming in and you have this big aperture that's open and your shutter stays open for a while, we can end up having too much light coming into the camera. Conversely, if the shutter is shut down, or if the aperture is shut down tight and your shutter only opens for a quick second, not enough light's going to come in. So this becomes those balancing acts where you need to understand the shutter speeds and the apertures So if I start, if I'm in a dark environment and I'm trying to get a good focal length, and so I start closing down my aperture, I got to keep my shutter open longer. The longer I keep my shutter open, though, if I'm holding my camera, I can get pictures that are blurry because I'm holding my camera. I naturally shake and vibrate a little bit. We all do. So this becomes where you start needing tripods and other little balancing acts. But we'll cover more of this throughout the semester. But just be aware that the aperture is the pupil of your eye, and you have basically like your eyelid, your shutter, which opens and closes and allows that light in. Typically, the shutter goes really quick, but sometimes we have to leave that shutter open for a while. So maximizing your DOF is, as much as possible, have those smaller aperture settings to give you that longer depth of field so you can see and read everything. Here we can read the evidence markers, and you can make them out. You get to 8, you can make it out. It's getting blurry. 9, well, it comes after 8. But then the rest of them, they start to blur, and you could probably count them and understand that you go out to 15. We can read these stones here. This is one of those little walkways where people have donated money. So we can read these, and yeah, you can't read them anymore. Here we can read 1. You can read all the way to 15. I mean, yeah, the 1 is blocked, so all you see is the 5. But we can see 12, 13, 14, so that's 15. You can read all of these blocks. It kind of gets hard just because of the angle to read them, but you can definitely tell that there is legible writing on all of these. Practical application of depth of field would be one of this, where a lot of times people say, what's the practical application? Because we take a lot of close-ups. Well, the practical applications would be this scene right here. Look at how we have a fair amount of scene. It doesn't go that far, but look at this isn't going that far either. Look at the distance. Each one of these bricks is what, like 6 inches? And so we've got 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have less than 20 feet here. And in this photo, we probably have a lot more than 20 feet of distance in this car crash. And so if we don't have a good depth of field, yeah, you'd be able to see this skid mark and you'd see the front bumper of the car, but everything else is going to be a big blur as we go away. So this is the practical application of our depth of field and why you need to have that cardinal rule of trying to maximize your depth of field when possible on the larger scale pictures. All right, so this one was pretty short and sweet, and we have one more lecture to go. Again, if you have any questions from this one, shoot them off to me right away or give me a call, and then we've got number 3 to watch at your next convenience. Thank you.